Good evening. You're watching the news at 7:30 on ATV. I'm Emily Sue.
And I'm Raymond Yeung. Here's a look at tonight's top stories.
Government under fire for building wall around main protest zone at Tamar to head off possible violence.
Number 3 typhoon warning signal in force for first time this year as powerful storm threatens Hong Kong.
Calls for entire MTRC board and not just CEO to take responsibility for Express Rail Link fiasco. The government has sealed off the main public protest zone at its headquarters in Tamar and is building a wall around it to head off radical protests expected over the political reform fallout.
Pro-democracy lawmakers have accused the government of adopting a siege mentality and being afraid of its own people instead of reaching out to them. ATV's Arthur Urquiola reports.
The walls were already up when the sudden announcement was made this morning that the East Wing forecourt of the government's headquarters at Tamar will be closed until the end of August. According to the official statement, it's been decided after a review that it is necessary to enhance the overall capacity of the central government offices to withstand potential security threats to the building. A perimeter fence is being put up along Tim May Avenue and the boundary between the main square and Lechco headquarters to strengthen security at the East Wing, bringing it on par with the West Wing. Security measures at the second floor entrance from the elevated walkway are also being stepped up. The government cited the recent violence at the adjacent Lechco complex as justification for fortifying and restricting public access to the main area where protesters and petitioners gather. Last month, demonstrators tried to storm the building, where lawmakers were debating the government's funding request to start developing the Northeast New Territories. When the security fence is in place, the area will be closed to the general public from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., but people with valid staff, Lechco and media permits will have access. The problem is this goes against the door always open policy, which was the concept behind the design of the headquarters when it was built in 2011. Critics are accusing the government of adopting a siege mentality as it braces for more radical protests and trouble ahead. The government has angered pro-democracy forces with its 2 reports on political reform submitted to Beijing, which critics say distorted the truth and ignored calls for genuine universal suffrage. There could be radical protests when the National People's Congress Standing Committee makes its own recommendations next month after studying the 2 reports.
I think it's obvious that they just want to suppress the freedom of expression because they are worried about the anger of the people, especially after the coming political reform consultation. And so in order to avoid the people demonstrating at that area, they try to close it down.
The square has been the main go-to area for rallies to the government compound and dubbed Civic Square following protests in 2012 against government plans to introduce national education. Democrat Emily Lau said it's ridiculous to think sealing off the entrance would prevent protesters from gathering, as it would instead drive them out into nearby streets and roads, which would then be blocked, causing bigger problems. The Civic Party's Dennis Kwok complained that the government was treating its own people like enemies. Other lawmakers are concerned the move will affect peaceful demonstrations, pointing out that small groups stage petitions at the entrance on an almost daily basis.
It's only a weak government and government without confidence on themselves that they will try to push people away from them, not wanting to listen clearly about their voice against the government. I hope the administration would think deeply and review their policy. Otherwise, they will be a government away from people. And the message is very bad.
The administration today insisted it fully respects freedom of expression and the right of peaceful assembly. After the fence is built, protesters can gather at the square during Sundays and public holidays, but this is subject to prior approval. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
A former top advisor to the government, Lau Siu-kai, has warned that Beijing is unlikely to acknowledge calls for ordinary voters to be allowed to select chief executive candidates.
He also questioned the wisdom of 2 pan-democratic leaders in complaining about Hong Kong's political problems to the British government. Lau Siu-kai was out to promote his new book today on Hong Kong's path towards democracy. The launch at the book fair came just after an important step in the city's political reform process, the release of the government's report on the formal consultation exercise and Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying's own report to Beijing. Both have been submitted to the National People's Congress Standing Committee, which is expected to lay out legal principles on achieving universal suffrage for the 2017 Chief Executive election. When that happens next month or in October, the former Central Policy Unit chief said it's unlikely Beijing will entertain calls to let ordinary voters select chief executive candidates.
The best it can do is to expand the representativeness of the nominating committee. But even so, I don't think it will really satisfy the aspirations and demands of the radical elements in the democratic camp.
Student activist groups have vowed to begin non-cooperative actions such as school boycotts and strikes as soon as Beijing rejects civil nomination, while the Occupy Central movement plans to launch a full-scale street blockade if Beijing rules out all chances of giving voters a genuine choice of candidates. Yesterday, former Chief Secretary Anson Chan and Democratic Party founder Martin Lee quoted British Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg as saying that the UK will honour its 1984 pledge to mobilise the international community if China breaches the one country, two systems principle for Hong Kong. Lau said it's not surprising for officials from the US and Britain to discuss the matter, but branded the move by Chan and Lee as useless.
I don't think that these countries will really take on China on behalf of Hong Kong's democratic development. The best he can do is to provide some moral support for the democracy or to apply some kind of pressure on Beijing.
Another prominent Beijing loyalist, Maria Tam, rejected allegations that the government's reports twisted the truth by claiming that mainstream opinion in Hong Kong is against civil nomination.
I think the report has truly reflected what information and views that they have gathered in the 5 months consultation period, and all the annexures are there for you to examine. So I think it truly reflects the view of Hong Kong people.
The first number 3 typhoon warning signal of the year is in force as a powerful storm threatens Hong Kong after leaving a trail of death and destruction in the Philippines.
Typhoon Raymond is expected to be closest to the city at around noon tomorrow, but is unlikely to trigger a higher warning signal. ATV's Alison Chan reports.
People were taking no chances this morning after waking up to the number 1 signal, which was raised at 11:40 last night as Typhoon Raymond approached Hong Kong. The alert was upgraded to number 3 at 4:15 p.m. today as the storm moved further into the northern part of the South China Sea, coming within 600 kilometers of the SAR. On its current forecast track, Raymond is expected to come closest to Hong Kong at around noon tomorrow before making landfall on the eastern tip of Hainan Island. The observatory warned of unsettled weather with windy conditions and heavy downpours over the next couple of days.
For local weather, we expect it will deteriorate further and the wind will strengthen. According to the present forecast track, the chance of having higher signal tonight is not high.
As Hong Kong prepares for the first major storm of the year, officials in southern China are taking steps to minimize damage and casualties. Earlier, the storm lashed the Philippines, where dozens of people were killed and hundreds of thousands lost their homes. Ahead of the approaching storm, China's southern island of Hainan has been pounded by torrential rains, while large waves lashed the coast. Some fishing boats were forced to sail to Hong Kong for shelter. Neighboring Guangdong ordered vessels to stop fishing near the Pearl River Delta. The Philippines, meanwhile, is counting the cost of Raymond, the first major storm to batter the country this year. The death toll has climbed to at least 40, with a number of people reported missing. Alison Chan, ATV News.
Lawmakers are calling for the MTRC's entire board of directors to be held accountable for the express railing fiasco, instead of blaming only the CEO and project's director.
They're also concerned about the big payout Jay Walder is expected to get when he steps down next month. A day after the MTRC announced the early exit of its CEO, it looks like the embattled railway firm has not been able to appease its critics. Jay Walder will leave next month, a year before his contract expires, to shoulder responsibility for the 2-year delay in building the $67 billion express rail link to Guangzhou and Shenzhen. An investigation by the railway firm's board singled out Walder and projects director Chu Tai-chong for blame. But concerns have resurfaced that the board has ignored its own failings in allowing the fiasco, and there have been calls for Chairman Raymond to face the music as well. LegCo's Railway Subcommittee Chairman Michael Tian called for the entire board of directors to take responsibility and share the blame. Tian, a former KCRC boss himself, complained that the report released yesterday didn't go far enough to condemn those who should be held accountable. He wants the board to be reshuffled. Tian said the directors have to monitor all the company's projects and cannot hive off that responsibility to the management alone. What questions did board members raise? Asked Tian. Some of them don't even read all the documents carefully. They just sit there and do nothing. There are also concerns about the MTRC's refusal to reveal details of the payout to Walder, who earns around $8 million a year plus bonuses.
The company must come out to explain to the public why we must offer a golden handshake to the CEO. The public demand them, especially the chairman, for an answer on that.
To questioned the justification for Walder getting a golden handshake instead of being penalized financially for the costly project delay. The lawmaker also accused the MTRC board of making the Public Relations Department the scapegoat for publishing what it called exaggerated press releases on the delay.
So you should not just put the blame or the major blame of the credibility crisis on the PR official. If the press release has the objective misleading effect, that misleading effect must be mandated by the technical director.
Former government minister Freddie Ma, who chaired the investigation panel, took to the airwaves to defend the MTRC. Ma brushed aside allegations that the board had failed to do its job, but admitted there's room for improvement. The former minister went on to say that it's up to the board to decide whether there should be a reshuffle. Ma stressed all board members have extensive experience and asked the public to judge whether that's good enough. As for calls for Walder to face tougher punishment, such as a reduced payout, Ma said the CEO's reputation has already been dealt a huge blow, and the public can judge whether that's severe enough. The railway firm will start recruiting for Walder's replacement globally, and Deputy CEO Lincoln Leung is one of the candidates being considered. With property prices spiraling out of control, developers are adopting a new strategy by building smaller flats that are more affordable for young buyers.
At just under $2 million a unit, a new residential complex in Tai Po offers the cheapest new flats in town, but they're tiny. In February last year, the government doubled the stamp duty for property worth $2 million or more in an effort to curb speculation and cool the red-hot market. While transactions have dropped, prices have shown no signs of easing, putting private flats out of reach for most people. Now there's a lot of buzz about these new units at Montfair in rural Tai Po. Buyers can get one for less than $2 million, but the flats are tiny, only 194 square feet, and they don't include a kitchen. Only 5 of them go on sale on Friday. They are part of 260 units that Cheung Kong is putting on the market. The other flats in the first batch are bigger and worth more than $2 million. The developer is not worried about speculators driving up prices. Executive Director Justin Chiu said prices are relatively low because of cheap land and construction costs, and the current property cooling measures will prevent short-term speculation. In a separate development, the Housing Authority is looking to speed up the allocation of public rental units for single applicants aged 45 or above. Currently, there are over 120,000 non-elderly singletons in line for public housing, but only 2,000 of them receive a flat each year, as priority is given to elderly or family applicants. After meeting this morning, the authority's subsidized housing panel suggested that singleton applicants receive extra points when they reach 35. Under the quota and points system, those getting more points will be moved up the waiting list and receive priority. The authority is also looking into reserving more flats for singleton applicants. now set at 8% of all allocable units each year, but no official announcement has been made. Still to come on ATV's main news tonight. 5 killed as firefighting helicopter crashes in South Korean city of Gwangju.
Glitz and glamour as sports stars turn up in style for awards night.
Battling for the MasterChef crown.
Difficult, challenging, but beautiful if he gets it right. It's a strange combination, but if it works, good.
Taking the challenge to make delicacies.
Oh, you're joking? I can't send that. Dump it now. It's absolute rubbish. I won't give it to the cats.
In this competition, only talent can stand out.
Time's up.
Gourmet Time, Celebrity MasterChef 7, tonight at 8:30.
Use your time wisely. Make every hour of every day count. Discover the real meaning of life on Hour of Power, every Sunday morning at 9.
Elemental Evolution, ATV Miss Asia Pageant 2014 is now inviting applications.
Elemental Evolution, the ATV 2014 Miss Asia Pageant is about to start. Ladies, come and show the world your beauty.
The selection of the chief executive by universal suffrage in 2017 will be a milestone in Hong Kong's constitutional development.
According to Article 45 of the Basic Law, a broadly representative nominating committee will nominate candidates. Then all voters will elect the chief executive through one person, one vote. Finally, there is appointment by the Central People's Government.
Following these steps, we can all elect our chief executive in 2017.
Landing a man on the moon, that's one giant leap for mankind. But for the two superpowers, America and the Soviets, that's the most intense struggle on the world's battlefield.
I just realized that the humanity reached the goal it had been desperately striving for.
Memories of the Century, Race to the Moon, Sunday night at 9.
A firefighting helicopter has crashed in South Korea, killing all 5 people on board and injuring a teenage girl on the ground.
The crash was a double tragedy, as the helicopter had been taking part in a search for people still missing after one of the country's worst maritime tragedies. ATV's Ann Chang reports.
Fire engines raced to a residential area in the South Korean city of Gwangju after a firefighting helicopter crashed to the ground this morning. All 5 people on board were killed as the aircraft burst into flames after going down 330 kilometers south of the capital, Seoul. A teenage girl who was waiting for a bus was slightly injured by debris from the chopper. The cause of the crash was not immediately known, but witnesses saw the helicopter spinning moments earlier before its deadly plunge. They believe the pilot was trying to land it on a spot without any people around. There's a school and apartment blocks just 10 meters from where the chopper came down. The helicopter was returning to its base after taking part in a search for people still missing after one of South Korea's worst maritime tragedies. More than 300 people, most of them children, died in mid-April when a ferry sank off the southwest coast of the country. 11 bodies have yet to be recovered. Today's tragedy takes to 7 the number of people killed in the search for those unaccounted for in the ferry disaster. Earlier, 2 divers drowned while searching the vessel's wreckage. Ann Chang, ATV News.
Thailand's military rulers have given permission to former Prime Minister Yeung to go to France for her brother's birthday party. Yeung was forced out of office for abuse of power. Her brother, former Prime Minister Thaksin, turns 65 later this month. He was also kicked out of office for corruption and is a fugitive from the law. Army officials say Yeung will be allowed back into the country after her European trip. The military takeover in May ended months of protests against Yeung, who was widely seen as a proxy for Thaksin.
A truce between Israel and the Palestinians has been broken by mortar fire from the Gaza Strip, although there's talk of a more comprehensive ceasefire deal.
Israel has sparked international outrage by shelling a beach and killing 4 Palestinian boys. 4 Palestinian cousins aged 9 to 11 were playing on a beach in the Gaza Strip when an Israeli gunboat in the Mediterranean opened fire. The children went away when the first shell landed, but a second rocket killed them. Other youngsters nearby were injured and were given first aid by journalists in a hotel close to the scene. Israel said the killing was tragic, but that was small comfort for grief-stricken and outraged Palestinians during the funeral of the 4 children. There was also mourning across the border for a 37-year-old man who was the first Israeli killed by Palestinian rockets. As the Palestinian death toll touched 220, U.S. President Barack Obama reaffirmed Washington's support for Israel to defend itself, but called for peace.
Over the past 2 weeks, we've all been heartbroken by the violence, especially the death and injury of so many innocent civilians in Gaza. Men, women, and children who are caught in the crossfire.
The UN also expressed concern about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Apart from the high civilian casualties, Israeli air raids have disrupted water supplies for the 1.7 million Palestinians trapped in Gaza, described as the world's largest open-air prison. Hamas, which rules Gaza, says Israel must lift its economic blockade of the tiny territory as part of a deal on a long-term truce. As tensions continued, a Palestinian-American teenager beaten up by Israeli police recalled his ordeal on his return to Florida. He was assaulted a day after his Palestinian cousin was burned to death by Israeli extremists in revenge for the abduction and murder of 3 Jewish students. Hamas denied involvement in the murder of the Jewish teenagers, whose deaths triggered the latest conflict. The US and the EU have slapped what's being described as the toughest sanctions yet on Russia for not doing enough to end the violence in Ukraine.
Moscow has warned the new economic restrictions will hurt foreign companies as much as Russian firms. ATV's Ben O'Rourke reports.
After threatening more sanctions for weeks, US President Barack Obama finally unveiled a new round as punishment for Moscow's perceived interference in eastern Ukraine and failure to help end the war involving pro-Russian separatists.
We have to see concrete actions and not just words that Russia, in fact, is committed to trying to end this conflict along the Russia-Ukraine border. So far, Russia has failed to take any of the steps that I mentioned.
The new sanctions include the freezing of assets of Russian defense companies and restrictions on banks and energy companies, as well as targeting a handful of senior officials.
Now, meanwhile, we're going to continue to stand with the Ukrainian people as they seek to determine their own future. Even in the midst of this crisis, they have made remarkable progress these past few months.
The US is accusing Russia of being behind the violence that is ravaging Ukraine by sending soldiers and weapons across the border. It's backing Kiev's military campaign, saying it has the right to defend itself. Hundreds of people have been killed in Kiev's crackdown on the east of the country, where locals who object to the Western-backed overthrow of the previous government are demanding independence from the new rulers. 11 people, including a child, were killed yesterday in an airstrike on a block of flats in the Donetsk region. Around 180,000 refugees have fled across the border into Russia to escape the bloodshed. At the same time, volunteers are queuing up to join the pro-government militia that's supporting Ukraine's ramshackle army. This new recruit said he can't sit by while killers and terrorists tear the country to pieces. The Russians deny having anything to do with the chaos. President Vladimir Putin warned that the new sanctions will also hurt US companies and take US-Russian relations to a dead end. European leaders meeting in Brussels have voiced their support for punishing Moscow further.
The situation in the Ukraine is unacceptable. The territorial integrity of that country is not being properly respected by Russia, and we need to send a very clear message with clear actions at this Council meeting tonight.
On top of the sanctions, the EU has decided to restrict investment in Crimea, which cut itself off from Ukraine to join Russia earlier this year. The Foreign Ministry in Moscow said it was disappointed that the Europeans caved into US blackmail and are supporting a policy that contradicts their own interests. Ben O'Rourke, ATV News.
It's time now for sports with Bo Leung.
So more footballers on the move, Bo.
Indeed, they include World Cup hero Toni Kroos. The German heads to Spain as Manchester United's new manager begins his reign. Dutchman Louis van Gaal was brought in by Manchester United after a dismal run last season. The coach who took Holland to third place in the World Cup in Brazil was officially unveiled as United's manager today. He kicked off his reign by ordering double training sessions for players. One of Germany's World Cup heroes has swapped Munich for Madrid. Toni Kroos, who played a major role in making his country world champions, has signed a 6-year deal with Real Madrid. The Spanish giants paid Bayern Munich $33 million for the midfielder. While Kroos moves to Madrid, Felipe Luis is preparing to leave the Spanish capital for London. The Atletico Madrid defender is joining Chelsea for $27 million, pending a medical, as a replacement for Ashley Cole, who has joined Roma. The 28-year-old Brazilian said it was difficult to leave Atletico after they became Spanish champions, but admitted he couldn't turn down the chance to turn out for Chelsea in the English Premiership. Barcelona raised eyebrows when they signed serial biter Luis Suarez from Liverpool, but the Spanish giants insisted that the Uruguayan is now 100% theirs. The Catalan club have to wait before presenting Suarez to fans because he's serving a 4-month ban from all football-related activities for sinking his teeth into the shoulder of an Italian player at the World Cup last month. Barca are trying to get the ban reduced so that Suarez can take to the field as soon as possible. Despite his bad boy image, Barcelona believe he'll bring positive vibes to the team. Massimiliano Allegri is taking the helm at Juventus after Antonio Conte's shock decision to quit the Italian champions. Allegri was sacked by AC Milan midway through last season following a dreadful start to the campaign, and his appointment has been met with scepticism by some fans. But the new boss said he is confident of keeping Juventus as Italy's top team and going far in the Champions League. In other sports news, the Seattle Seahawks and the US World Cup football team were among the winners at ESPN's annual Star-Studded Sports Awards show. Top athletes stepped out of their sportswear and dressed up to the nines for a night of glitz and glamour at this year's ESPY Awards. Boxing champion Floyd Mayweather, US football captain Clint Dempsey, Russian tennis star Maria Sharapova and basketballer Kevin Durant were just some of the big names in the world of sport who graced the red carpet at the star-studded event in Los Angeles. Now in its 22nd year, ESPY, the Excellence in Sports Performance Yearly Awards, gives top performers a chance to catch up with those in other sports.
USA beats Ghana.
World Cup fever still rages in the US, and this was reflected when the country's football team picked up the Best Moment in Sports prize. Michael Sam, the first openly gay player to be drafted by the NFL, took home the Arthur Ashe Courage Award.
And thank you, everyone. The Arthur Ashe Courage Award is a big honor, one much bigger than just me.
NFL quarterback Peyton Manning won 2 trophies for best record-breaking performance for making 55 touchdowns and most passing yards in a single year.
Thank you very much.
The Jim V Perseverance Award went to ESPN anchor Stuart Scott, who is battling cancer. The Seattle Seahawks, who won this year's Super Bowl, were chosen as best team. A look at the weather before we go. The strong wind signal number 3 is in force as Typhoon Ramasan edges closer to the South China coast. It was mainly cloudy today with isolated showers and squally thunderstorms. Temperatures range from 28.4 to 32.1 degrees, while the relative humidity was between 68 and 85%. Gusts reaching 100 kilometers an hour or more have affected the city. Let's check on the ultraviolet reading. The maximum recorded for the day was 11. Tomorrow's UV index will be around 6. Now for a look at the weather in the region. A short while ago, Typhoon Ramosun was estimated to be about 540 kilometers south of Hong Kong. It is forecast to intensify and move northwest at about 22 kilometers per hour in the general direction of western Guangdong and Hainan Island. And now the satellite images. Cloud bands associated with the typhoon are covering the northern part of the South China Sea. Here's what we can expect over the next few days. It will be cloudy with gale-force winds, heavy rain and squally thunderstorms tomorrow. Temperatures will range from 27 to 31 degrees. More wet weather in the following few days. Here are the latest pollution readings under the Air Quality Health Index. General stations are at 2 to 3, meaning the health risk is low. Roadside levels are at 3. Finally, here's the weather around the world.